Hello, friends. 2020 has undoubtedly had a negative impact on the emotional well being of many. Personally, I know many people are going through a hard time right now. COVID 19 has really taken its toll on the mental health of many. The pandemic has forced the creation of this new normal in which face to face interaction is becoming increasingly dangerous. As a result, many people are isolated. But this challenging phase gives us all a moment to reflect on what is most important: the health and safety of our families and our communities. How can we ensure that the mental health of many is not compromised? I will be exploring this question through a variety of perspectives in a series of short conversations in the run up to the virtual World Music Conference 2020. My guest today is Ramya Palacholla from the healthcare field. Dr. Ramya Palacholla is a scientist and a primary care physician and a faculty member at the Harvard Medical School. She's a specialist in public health and community medicine. I'm really excited and looking forward to hearing her perspectives that she's going to impart with us today.
I've learned some Carnatic music. My love was for dancing. So a lot of it, my time was spent learning Bharatanatyam and, Kuchipudi, a little bit of Kuchipudi. And I did a lot of other Western forms as well, like hip hop and salsa.
Right.
Had a diploma in salsa as well. So I did a lot of dancing and yoga as well. So music, I love music. I love going to, I love hearing people sing and everything.
We have lots of cases increasing every day due to the pandemic. But we're also seeing a lot of anxiety among people that is really concerning. I feel it is important for us to address this issue of mental health to the public and to the community. We're not talking about merely the protection from the COVID 19, but also the preventive measures to cope with the stress, fear, and anxiety during these challenging times.
There is a great need to bring about awareness about mental health issues, particularly, coming from where I come from in India and, the South Asian communities. I've seen there are a lot of gaps in terms of mental health awareness, and I think this is something that I've been very passionate about. And particularly in the context of the pandemic, a lot of what we hear today is mostly about the physical symptoms that people face. The breathlessness, the different, other clinical features like fever, hospitalizations, and all of that. And I think a lot of us now started talking about mental health, which is great because one of the key, as per the scientific studies as well, one of the key impacts of COVID-19 has been anxiety and depression and even suicidal thoughts and behavior in a lot of different people. And this is, it is more pronounced in people with comorbidities like long-term chronic pain and diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or SLE. And it's also more pronounced in the elderly who've been facing a lot of social isolation because of the pandemic. And surprisingly, there's a lot of mental health impact on the children as well. So I think this is a very big impact as far as the pandemic is concerned. And I think definitely an important topic to talk about. The worst part is that the mental health issues not only have a psychological effect on the individual, but there's a lot of physical effect on the individual as well, in terms of just reducing your capacity to fight off an illness. And that's not a good thing when it comes to COVID-19, because as you know, our immunity is of great importance at this time. So stress and anxiety and fear and depression have been proven to really reduce your immunity as well. So and that's not very favorable in this pandemic. So I think it's a very important conversation to have. So I'm glad we're talking about it today.
Fear, anxiety, and depression are, of course, the most concerning issues during this COVID 19, very rightly said. What possible effects would this have on our immune system?
Traditionally, even before the pandemic came into the picture, stress and anxiety, there have been several research studies on this. And, the subjects who were studied as part of these research studies, they measured their immunity as part of the studies. And stress and fear and anxiety have been shown to reduce the immune system in the sense that it reduces the T cells and other immune, other type of fighter cells that we have in the body that help us ward off infections. So I think there is a very measurable physiological impact of stress and anxiety on our immune system. So, and that basically what happens then is that once these cells come down in your body, you're not able to fight off infections as well as you could have if you weren't, stressed out or anxious. And I think that's a very big, impact that we are seeing today in a lot of people. And in the long term too, I think chronic stress and anxiety could actually reduce your ability to fight off, tumor cells. And you could also, there's a lot of incidence of cancer and other long-term chronic diseases in people who have suffered stress and anxiety. So I think stress and anxiety could be the precursor to any disease, you name it, and it could be the impacts. Worse is that we have a tendency, and not just perhaps in the South Asian communities, but the world around, to treat physical symptoms or physically disabling diseases like diabetes and hypertension as something very legitimate. The root cause for most of these diseases is at the level of the mind. It's interesting that we're so free, and we're not afraid of talking about the impact of mental health, but we're afraid of raising the topic of mental health and say that I have suffered from anxiety. All of us, I think, at some point would have suffered from moments of depression and anxiety, and particularly in COVID-19. And I myself have suffered several anxious moments in the past. I think this is something that we need to talk more about.
This is the time where people should come forward and talk about how to address this issue of mental health. We are all in a situation currently where no vaccine found. This has actually increased the anxiety amongst people. How would you advise them to cope during such circumstances?
Define it in medical terms, anxiety is often considered as a legitimate medical condition where you have both psychological, behavioral, and even physical symptoms, such as having that really sad and dreadful feeling before any event in your life, and constant and obsessive thinking or fear of a certain, the death of a loved one, for example, or you could be anxious about anything. It's a very profoundly debilitating condition. When it comes to anxiety, there are always certain triggers that everybody works with. So we all have different triggers for our anxiety and different levels of responses to our anxiety triggers. So I think it's really important to talk about the coping strategies. First and the foremost thing is that if you have these feelings of anxiety, it's really important to get the support of people around you, whether it's your family or your friends, to be able to talk about it. Maybe not, you don't have to talk about it to everybody, but find at least one person who you really trust and can confide in, and talk to them, and get their help and support, and then reach out to a doctor or a psychotherapist or a counselor. And I think this is something most people know nowadays. Besides that, there are a lot of things that we can do ourselves. One of the things that, coming back to our the conference theme itself, is the importance of yoga and meditation. As a yoga practitioner myself, I cannot begin to explain what a great impact yoga has on your mental health. There's so many people teaching so many different techniques, and I think whatever works for you, take it up. But one thing is that we almost tend to expect an immediate result, but that often does not happen in yoga. I think consistent practice is what is really needed to address.
Very rightly said. As a musician, I feel music also has its very important role in the form of a holistic healing.
I think we all can do whatever we can for the other people, whether it is just connecting them with somebody else or just, talking to them.
Yeah, it's very important to show that connectivity, that yes, I'm here to help you, to reach out to people. Very,
Yep.
very useful insights.
Key thing we all must remember is that we're not alone, and almost everybody has gone through some form of this. So I think there's some kind of feeling of support, mutual support, that we feel when we think like this.
COVID-19 has not only had a negative impact on just the adults or the vulnerable people, there are many, many millions of children and young people who are equally affected. So, as parents, there is an important responsibility, I feel, that should be addressed. Give them that support, give them the confidence.
So, no, I think that's a very important question, Chitra. Glad you brought this up because we all know at this point that COVID, particularly hasn't impacted children to the extent that it has impacted adults in terms of physical symptoms, because the physical symptoms have been nil to mild in most children, with just very few requiring an ICU admission. So while we're all aware of that, one thing that has been largely ignored is the mental health impact on the children. The worst part is that the pandemic could not only have short-term mental health impact on children, but also long-term. So, and I think particularly the younger children, between the ages of 3, 4 to about 10, 11 till they hit the teens. I think these people are the ones who are really confused at this time because they really don't know what is happening. One thing is to really talk to them and explain to them in a way that they can understand what's going on. Another key thing that I've always told other people is this works like in an emergency situation on the flight. You must mask yourself first before masking the child if there is a drop in oxygen levels. So first take care of yourself so that the child can see that and model that behavior, and you are better able to take care of the children. Because a lot of times what happens is, I see this with my parents too, and everybody else, particularly South Asian parents as well. They want, all parents, they want to give so much to their children and they want to take care of the children that they get so stressed out and so busy trying to take care of their children that they forget that there is something called self care that they need to exercise on themselves. So I think that's one thing we would, I would love for all parents, and not just parents, everybody, to know that it's important to take care of ourselves first so that we can take care of the other people in our life. Children particularly are very, very good at modeling behavior. So I think that's a very effective way, because I think for most children, if you tell them to do these things, they might not do it. But I think they're good when they see you do it. They'll take you as a role model and do it. So that's one thing I would suggest. When it comes to teenagers and adolescents, I think the biggest impact has been loss of the daily structure and routine that they had, and the isolation from their friends and school environment that they had. I think that has had the worst impact on these kids. Sitting down with them and explaining to them what's going on and asking them to talk about their feelings, just letting them talk about their feelings, I think will be really helpful. I think it's really important to facilitate that conversation and have them talk about what they're feeling, and then really then helping them by giving them the coping strategies if they're feeling isolated. I think it's important to understand their perspective and then sort of help them to cope with this. It's not just the physical symptoms of COVID-19 that you must be afraid of. In fact, the mental health impact is far more scarier, and particularly the long-term impact. And this is far more pronounced, obviously, in children with disabilities, children who are from a lower socioeconomic background. So all of these children have an even more hard time coping up with these stresses and adverse childhood experiences.
Fantastic. It's important to speak to them, the kind of setting they are currently in. I'm really looking forward to your detailed presentation at the World Music Conference. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I'm also looking forward to, the other talks as well as part of the conference. I think thank you for this opportunity to talk about mental health.